After going through my first full season of competitive Pokemon TCG, here are some things I think can be improved. First of all, these are strictly personal opinions, but I do think many people will agree with me on most of my points. And secondly, I want to point out that the organizers over here in Singapore have done a great job in organizing these official tournaments. Granted, there were a few hiccups at the start, but as the season progressed, they improved a lot and our tournaments became a lot smoother. I think at the end of the season, most players didn't have any complaints about how the tournaments were run and the matchups and whatnot. So this video comes more from the angle of how can we improve on the system, how can we encourage more players to come and play, and how we can make the players from our region more competitive compared to the rest of the world. Now I'll start off with some background information. Most countries in Southeast Asia play under the Pokemon Company, which is based in Japan. So we have a similar qualifying criteria to countries like Japan and Taiwan who are also under TPC. We are only allowed to compete in tournaments in our respective countries, and only the top X players from each country get to qualify for Worlds. The number of players per country is capped, and this is different from players who play under the system of the Pokemon Company International or TPCI. Players under TPCI can take part in tournaments all around the world, except for countries under TPC of course, and they get points based on their results in those tournaments. They qualify for Worlds if they hit a certain number of points. Which brings me to the first suggestion, and that is for us to adopt the threshold system as well. You see, we do earn points based on our finishes at official tournaments, but we don't get to know who qualifies for Worlds until the end of our season. That's because only the top X players qualify per country, and most countries under the TPC system will end the season with their respective national championships. These carry lots of points and can change who is at the top quite drastically. So players under TPC cannot 100% guarantee their spot in Worlds until the end of the season, which is typically around late May or June. This gives them less than 2 months to prepare for a trip to the World Championship venue. And this can be a logistical nightmare because there is work commitments to work around, flights to book, accommodations to book, travel itineraries to plan, etc. etc. Not impossible to book them within the short time period, but it's not easy either. Having a points threshold system will make things a lot easier. The better players would qualify and book their itineraries earlier, and players have a better idea of how many points is needed in the last few tournaments of the season if they want to qualify for Worlds. Under the current TPC system, we have to guess and extrapolate all the different scenarios that might happen, like if I qualify for top 8 and the players behind me don't qualify for top 16, I will qualify. Or if the players above me get top 16, I have to get top 4 to qualify. You know, scenarios like this. Because it doesn't matter how many points you get, if there are players with more points than you, they qualify instead of you. And do take note that sometimes the players you don't want to do well can be players in your same test group or friends that you play regularly with. And I think it's quite unhealthy for you to wish other people don't do well so that you can qualify for Worlds. Having a threshold system would get rid of that, because the scenario will become, hey, you need a top 16 finish, I need a top 8 finish, let's work hard, practice together, and devise strategies so that the both of us can qualify together. And having experienced one full season under TPC, I think most countries should have a good idea of where to place that benchmark number of points at in order to not let too many people qualify, but at the same time have a good standard of measuring. The second suggestion is for the scenario if we can't have the threshold system, and that is to have the number of qualifiers the next season be determined by the results of the actual qualifiers for the past few seasons. The closest example or analogy I can think of is European football. The biggest club competition in Europe is called the Champions League, where football teams from different countries compete to be the best team in Europe. To qualify for the Champions League, you have to be the top X teams in your respective countries, with X being different for different countries. How X is determined is by the performance of the qualified teams over a period of 5 years. So if teams from a certain country did well consistently, the country will be awarded one more slot in the Champions League. Now, to translate that over to Pokemon TCG, this would mean measuring the results and performances of the players from each country and giving them a score. And the countries who did well will get additional slots at the expense of the countries that didn't do so well. For the current system, the countries in Southeast Asia under TPC all have 4 to 5 qualifiers. And to be honest, I feel that's a bit lazy, because prior to TPC we were under TPCI and the number of qualifiers per country was different. I got the ever reliable Cash, do follow him on Twitter, to compile the number of Worlds qualifiers from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia and the Philippines. And these were the results. As you can see, Singapore and Malaysia have been sending more players to Worlds compared to the rest of the region. Now, I don't want to be the guy that suggests taking slots away from other countries, but I also have to accept that the number of slots in Worlds is limited. And I do feel that sending better players to Worlds is better than having a higher representation from each country. The points threshold system is definitely the fairest, but in the event we cannot have that, I feel that there should be a fairer allocation of the slots instead of just giving every country under Southeast Asia the same number of slots. The third suggestion would be to make our tournaments best of 3. Now, I understand why countries like Japan or Taiwan adopt a best of 1 system. Their major tournaments have at least 3 to 5,000 players, and it's impossible for them to complete the Swiss rounds in 2 days if they were to have a BO3 format. But over here in Southeast Asia, our player pools are a lot smaller, and we definitely can afford the time to complete the tournaments for BO3 in 1 day for town leagues and 2 days for regionals and nationals. BO3 has many benefits and advantages over BO1. Firstly, I feel it's a better benchmark of a player's skill. Imagine you are playing a win and in for top card, and you miss out on top 16 because all you could do in your first turn was to attach energy to a Cramorant and then pass. BO3 will reduce the impact of bricking, because if you brick 1 game, there are 2 more games for you to catch up and win the match. You also learn the skill of time management during a match. Learning to scoop 1 game early can make the difference between a loss and a tie, or a tie and a win. And for players who are used to playing BO1, this is something that they don't develop in their countries until they go for Worlds. A BO3 format will also encourage a larger variety of decks played. For example, most players under BO1 system will avoid playing control decks. That's because under TPC rules, if a game goes to time, which is 25 minutes, and there's no winner, both players get a loss. So it's really difficult for a control player or a player who wants to play a control deck to survive in a BO1 format. Because most control decks, I would think, would aim to finish the game 1 in 35 to 40 minutes and then make sure your opponent doesn't get another win in the remaining time. Making the format BO1 25 minutes means that the control player has to make sure that he or she can finish the game within 25 minutes, which is not impossible but very difficult. Or they just drop the idea of playing control. So essentially, a BO3 format will encourage a larger variety of decks being played. The fourth suggestion is probably the easiest to implement, and that is to release the tournament dates early. We just concluded NAIC recently, And they have announced the dates for the first regionals that will be played in the upcoming season, which will begin in September. This gives players months to plan and prepare for the events they want to attend, and they can also plan their schedules around the major tournaments. We have had the dates of regionals and nationals announced less than a month before it, so I do feel that a lot can be done to improve on this. Give us time to prepare for tournaments and for us to plan our schedules around them. I have organized events for more than 1,000 participants, and I understand that it is not easy to plan one, but I also know it can be done, and the earlier you give a confirmed date, the more it will help the people that are interested to take part in your events. This suggestion is probably the easiest to implement, so I do hope that we can see it in the upcoming season. The fifth suggestion is probably the most controversial, but I would like to see harsher judge decisions in the upcoming season. Now, hear me out. From my conversations with the judges here in Singapore, there is different judging criteria for TPC and TPCI. Notice I didn't say which one is better, I just said they were different. Under TPC, the judges will try to de-escalate the issue and try to reverse the board state as much as possible. For example, in one of my games, I placed a 5th bench Pokemon which was Gudra V and used Melanie to attach a water energy onto it and drew 3 cards. During my opponent's next turn, he pointed out that Collapse Stadium was in play and I shouldn't have been able to bench the Gudra V. A judge was called and his decision was to return the illegal Gudra V back to the hand, attach the water energy to the only other possible target which was the active Gudra V star, and continue with the game. This way the Gudra V doesn't get benched, the Melanie still gets played, and I don't draw cards that I shouldn't have been able to. My opponent agreed with the ruling. I was prepared and willing to accept a harsher penalty, so I agreed with it too. Though I did feel that I got off the hook there. The reason I brought this example up was to highlight the difference between TPC and TPCI judge rulings. Mainly because under TPC, the judges will try to maintain the board state or reverse it as much as they can. Only if they are unable to, then penalties will be issued. They will also try to de-escalate the issue and give players the benefit of the doubt. While I do feel that this innocent until proven guilty approach is good, we do need to make sure that players don't take advantage of it. Because as much as we don't want to admit it, players will try to cheat or gain an unfair advantage. And if the punishment isn't harsh enough, more players will try and test the system. Because if a player knows that the judges will try to de-escalate and that the risk of prize penalties or game losses are low, the risk might be worth it for them. I know it's a very delicate balancing act, and judges have the most thankless and underappreciated jobs in the game for sure, but the general feel, at least for the tournaments I took part here in Singapore, is that the punishments could have been harsher. Of course, players have to play their part too. Number 1, don't take it too personally or feel too sad when you receive a penalty from a judge. If you made an error, chances are you have to pay a penalty for it, accept it and move on. It happens to the best of players, so it can happen to anyone. And number 2, if you disagree with a ruling, be it too harsh or too lenient, you do have the option of appealing to a higher judge or the head judge. To bring it back to the point, as ironic as it may sound, having harsher penalties can actually encourage more players to come into the game. You make the players who try to gain an unfair advantage think more before trying it, and this will help create a more safe and fair environment for players who actually want to play the game in a fair manner. The last suggestion is to open up our competitions to each other. As of now, we can only compete in tournaments held in our respective countries. While this makes sure that nobody from other countries can come in and steal our points, it doesn't improve the quality of our players. We improve by getting exposed to other players and exchanging ideas and playstyles. So if we don't get to play with players from other countries, our growth will be limited. Maybe we can start small by having one regional slot per country per season to be open to other countries under TPC. This way we can interact with players from other countries in the region, and also ensures that there are enough country locked tournaments for players who are unable to travel around. So you have town leagues, regionals and nationals to be country locked, and have like a Singapore Open, Malaysia Open for all players from Southeast Asian countries under TPC to take part in. Of course, ideally I would want us to be able to get points from regionals all around the world and for players from all around the world to come visit us. But I think that is a huge stretch and probably not gonna happen. But I do think that having one open tournament per country where players around the region or even around the world can take part in will be a step in the right direction. Alright, so those were the 6 suggestions that I feel can help improve the Pokemon TCG scene here in Southeast Asia. Do you agree with them? Or do you have any other suggestions that you think may help? Let me know in the comments. Also let me know which of the 6 suggestions you want to see in your region. Most importantly, share this video so that more people can see it. With that, thank you for coming to the end of the video, sending you lots of love, see you in the next one.